is happening, fellow fantasy GMs? I am JJ Wang. He is the bearded one, DJ Dub. And with our powers combined, we are the Fantasy Couriers.
Wow, we are basically halfway through July. Training camps are about ready to start. I am super giddy for a training camp. Well, not really, because there's nothing that really goes on. All that happens is guys get hurt. But I'm super giddy because that means we are close to football. I can't wait. Are you guys excited for football?
I mean, always excited for football, right? I mean, this is why we do the podcast. I mean, we pretty much wait all year for 17 weeks that go by and a time that feels like 3 weeks, and then we're right back in the same situation again.
Yeah, it's funny. Even when it's not technically football season, you've got basketball and hockey in there, and people are still talking about football. So it's almost always football season. I think even news podcasts and shows like that are even more football oriented than they are. You got hockey that goes on until, I don't know, are they even done yet? I think they just finished up. The Panthers won or something. They play into July, and then they start right back up in October again. It's like their season is 10 months long, and it's like nobody really cares as much as football, which is really only like 5 months long. So yeah, it's always football season though, man.
Oh, wait, what's that voice we hear? Oh, wait, look, that's Jeff DeMers. He came back for a second week. We were glad to have him with us last week. Guys, I'm going to give everybody a secret, how the hot dog is made. We actually recorded back-to-back episodes with Jeff because I'm out of town, busy for the 2 weeks. And I said, Jeff, would you like to record 2 episodes? He's like, sure. We had such a good time recording the wide receivers. If any big news did happen this week, we'll get it when we double back in 2 weeks. But we recorded twice with Jeff. So, Jeff, give them Jeff is here. He is from a website. He's working on downfieldread.com, and he's getting ready to start with some exciting ventures within the website. Give us a reminder of who in the world you are and what you want us to know about you. Go for it, Jeff.
Yeah, my name is Jeff, and if you said that in your head like Channing Tatum from 22 Jump Street, then we can be friends. That's basically how that works. My name is Jeff. I started this as just kind of a fun thing, writing out and blogging about football happenings, football games, predicting drafts. Just because it is football. I mean, we mentioned it before. Football is a year-long thing, man. So it's fun no matter what month that you're in, and there's always something to write about. And hobby turned into something else, and that something else, which was the downfieldread.com site, where you can find some entertaining articles to read, is going to turn into later this month Spotify and a YouTube channel and all that fun stuff. So we're going to get more involved with it. I get to partner with great guys like DJ Dove and JJ Wang. I get to partner and collaborate with Fantasy Turf Wars, which is fantastic. So yeah, it's football is full steam ahead right now in the beginning of mid-July.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's exciting because we mentioned you heard us talk check out fantasyturfwars.com. We're all part of that. We're still learning what's going on, our interviews. Have you recorded your interview yet, Jeff, for Fantasy Turf Wars?
I did, yeah. I recorded the interview with Corey earlier last week. He's going to send over the edited version of it, so that's going to hopefully go up soon as well. So yeah, that was a good time.
Hey. Might be ahead of us. We recorded a while back. I don't know the order when they're coming out. So if you want to see the interview of all this Corey interviewed all 64 teams. It's going to be on there. There's going to be a YouTube site. So check it out, fantasyturfwars.com. There's a YouTube channel. It's a little bit everywhere. It's how we met each other. And what we're going to do this week is we're going to continue jumping into my receiver rankings. But I got one question for you, just because there's one guy this year that I'm in love with. JJ Wang knows what I'm talking about. He's going to roll his eyes if you watch really closely, if you're watching the video. But this is my fantasy man crush, and I don't really know why. And it's not Tua. JJ thinks it's Tua, but it's Will Levis. I'm on the Will Levis. See, told you. I'm on the Will Levis. This is the Will Levis hype train going on over here on the East Coast and 30 minutes east of DC in my house. I almost want to buy a Will Levis jersey because that's the look that JJ Wayne gave me 2 years ago when I almost bought a Jared Goff jersey. And look who's laughing now. So tell me your thoughts on Will Levis, and then I'm going to let JJ Wang take over the receiver show after the drop.
My take on Will Levis, I don't hate Levis. I definitely don't hate his ex-girlfriend. So I think Levis can be I think he could be a decent quarterback. I won't say great. I think he can be an above average quarterback. I think he can be one of those guys for the long term where, You know, he's a 10 to 15 type of quarterback. If you get some really good weapons around him, which in Tennessee last year, outside of the King, I'm not sure what you had as far as a passing game. DeAndre Hopkins, you know, he's not exactly in his prime. He's going, yeah. So I think Will Levis put together a stereotypical or common year for rookie quarterbacks last year. I think this year, if he does the same thing, you've got your answer and maybe your man crush is over. I don't know. Because Levis really has to up his game this year. I hope he spent a lot of time getting his skills together, really.
Well, I did actually. I had as part of the Fantasy Pros, I get to write little article blurbs, and I'll tell you about that after we get off the show. Little side note, but I wrote about one of my mid-level receivers for redraft this year that I'm in love with is Calvin Ridley. Thinking they threw him the money, and Will Levis likes to sling it, and my whole idea is they're building it around Will Levis. So I wrote a whole blurb about Calvin Ridley this week. I was kind of excited about. And
I feel like a majority of the quarterbacks in the NFL like to sling it, but I mean, there's only a handful of them that can actually sling it. So I mean, we'll see how it goes. Like I said, I don't hate Will Levis. I just don't think he's a very good quarterback. I think he's more of like 23 to 30-ish type. I mean, maybe your second quarterback. I mean, if Will Levis is my QB2, I'm not happy.
Where do I have? Hey, I have Will Levis at 18. He loved.
Yeah, exactly. But this is a wide receiver show. We've had plenty of time to talk about Will Levis and his subpar quarterback play, other than that first game that he was in. But we'll switch back over to the wide receivers. There's just so many to talk about.
Last for years, a fantasy dynasty can crumble in minutes. But if we've learned anything over these years, fantasy dynasties need receivers, and the fantasy receiver is how dynasties are built. Introducing DJ Dub's Dynasty Fantasy Receiver Rankings, Part 2.
Yes, so the first two guys I'll bring up here, I feel like these first two guys belong with the 15 that we did last week. I think they're in that tier, and then after that, I think that's when things start becoming a jumbled mess, and anywhere from 18 to 36 is probably pretty much the same. So you got Devonta Smith at 16 and Nico Collins at 17. Both of them got paid this season. Both of them had decent years last year. Nico Collins is his team's number one. Devonta Smith, I mean, obviously the team's number two, but he could take that step to be a number one. Do both of y'all feel that Devonta Smith and Nico Collins belong with the top 15 that we had last week?
Devonta Smith, I'm going to say no on him, only because they do have A.J. Brown. I'm not really sold as much as I would, or as much as I was on Jalen Hurts, and I still think that they have a pretty good running game. I think anytime you've got that number one, number two, really good wide receiver combo, you lose a little bit there. And we kind of talked about it in the previous show about Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. You've got two really good wide receivers. They're going to have to split catches. So I don't have that. And then you've got kind of the same situation with Nico Collins. Now you got Stephon Diggs in Houston. So who's going to take over there? They have a decent running game. They got Joe Mixon in the offseason. I like CJ Stroud. I said that before. I like Nico better than I like Devonta, probably by a good 5 or 6 wide receivers.
Oh, wow. Yeah. JJ's a Devonta Smith guy. I've grown on Smith. Nico, I love me some Nico. I've been riding that pony ever since he came into the league. I got him for $1 in an auction draft, and now I'm enjoying having him in a dynasty. I'm surprised. What about DK? I'm hearing a lot of talk up on DK. Would he have went? I thought you were going to throw him into that discussion, JJ Wayne, because he's my number 18. Or I'm starting to almost fade him. I don't know. Something's feeling JSN might be sneaking up. Is that what's pulling you back on him?
That's where I'm going. I think JSN eventually takes over the number one spot. I think he'll take over the number one spot by the first game of the season. I think he'll be the number one guy. DK Metcalf will be a great number two. But yeah, I just think with Jackson Smith only being 22 years old, we're talking about young players. I mean, you've got Roma Dunze up here at number 20. You got Roma Dunze at 20. I mean, really, what's the difference between Roma Dunze and Jackson Smith and Jigba, right? At least Jackson Smith and Jigba has been in the NFL. He did produce last year. I think he still had almost 100 targets last year. So being the third option on a team and still getting your 100 targets, I still think that was okay. And most of that came in the second half of the season. So he kind of opened it up a little bit. So in my personal opinion, you've got Jackson Smith at 25. I would almost replace him with DK Metcalf at 18.
Ooh. What do you think about that take? That the Seattle Seahawks stellar receiving core, because you still have Tyler Lockett. I love the running back.
Yeah, of course. I think JJ's got a point. I think the whole purpose of JSN is to get in there a little bit more. I think he needs to take over that number 2 spot. And now Seattle has a defensive-minded guy in Mike McDonald, who was the defensive coordinator for Baltimore last year, my beloved team, who I almost would have liked to see him take John Harbaugh's spot as the head coach. So you've got the three-headed monster. You've got Kenneth Walker in the backfield. You've got a lot of offensive weapons, and the only thing that's going to keep Seattle from not making the playoffs this year is going to be the quarterback. It's going to be Geno. And if it's not Geno, who did they just get? They just got Sam Howell, who took the first most. He was sacked the most in Washington last year, but he flings the ball around, right? So he's passing it around, but it's because they were down a lot. So I think you have to look at the number 2 quarterback there, but I do like JSN as a number 2 guy. Yeah.
Yeah, so so we got DK Metcalf at 18. We got Tank Dell at 19. Of course, I mentioned Roma Dunze at 20. DJ Moore at 21. Rashee Rice at 22. T. Higgins 23, and Mike Evans at 24. Mike Evans is a little older, but he still produces. I really don't see Mike Evans slowing down. I still think he's going to get his 1,000 yards and probably 10 touchdowns, because that seems to be what he does every year. Rashee Rice is Rashee Rice the most questionable one out of this bunch
this year?
Yeah, I think he is, just because who knows how long he's going to get suspended for. Yeah, I mean, is it? I read an article the other day. They said it could be up to 12 games. I don't think it's going to. I don't think it's going to be that high. I'm thinking 4, maybe 6, but still, if that's the case, and they've got a lot of this legal stuff to go through, if that is the case, I think he falls. I think an intriguing person on KC outside of that is Hollywood Brown. I think he suffered in Arizona. I don't think he got the due credit, although he did have a lot of drops when he was in Baltimore. I think he's kind of that mystery. Don't sleep on Hollywood Brown, because if Rashee Rice isn't there, they don't have anybody else for real.
Not a Worthy guy?
Well, I'm not a Xavier Worthy guy. I get that he's fast.
The end.
Good job. You're a fast guy. Whoop-de-doo. Is he going to be a punt returner and a kick returner? Maybe that's what's best suited for him. Who knows? I'm not a Xavier Worthy. I don't think he was a first-round guy. I think he was maybe an early second-round guy. Again, and I mentioned it before, Adonai Mitchell. I think he should have went first round instead. But hey, I'm not an NFL GM. So I think Hollywood Brown is the intriguing one there in Kansas City. For as much as Mahomes scrambles around, he's got to find that intermediate guy, and that's where Hollywood Brown falls in. And he's still got wheels.
Yeah, I kind of like the Hollywood Brown connection with Patrick Mahomes. Like I said, I mean, Rashee Rice he's not like that deep threat. He's more like I don't want to say a dump off guy, but I feel like he's more of a dump off guy. I don't know how well that translates to being like an elite fantasy wide receiver, correct?
Yeah, I mean, he is. I do have it. Rashee Rice is at like 22, which would be a good play if he's that PPR. Yeah. So I had to take it. He was the hard one, and I have him higher because I'm here in the 12 games. I'm here in the 4 games. I'm looking at he basically drove really fast and punched a dude who's not going to sue him at a bar, and he's a knucklehead. And that's what did Alvin Kamara? Alvin Kamara got 4 4 games
Yeah.
like 2 years later. But if it's only say he gets 4 or 6 games, that's 4 to 6 games this year. Or I'm hearing it might not even be till 25. So he misses 4 or 6 games, and in a 3-year window, 4 or 6 games without Patrick Mahomes, that's just 4 or 6 games. The other games could be stellar, and if he's that dump off guy, I mean, Wes Welker made a living, and then you go on to any of those Tom Brady kind of guys. Mahomes is, to me, is like this generation's Tom Brady, and he'll get it to everybody, but there might be that guy, and Kelsey's going to age out, and it's going to be someone. And he showed that he liked Rishi as a rookie, and that's why he was a hard one to play. So I'm like, I'm going to gamble. I mean, I did have Amon-Ra 1, so why not throw Rishi at 22 while I'm at it?
I like Rasheed Rice. I've got nothing, no quarrels. I mean, I thought he played well last year. Like I said, I'm just not sure how this whole thing's going to work out. But these next 2 guys, I feel like Jeff can give us a lot of insight on these next 2 guys. I feel like these are right down his alley. So at number 26, we got Jordan Addison from Minnesota. And then at number 27, we got Zay Flowers from Baltimore. Now, we all know that Baltimore has never had a good wide receiver, I'm pretty sure. At least I can't remember one. Can Zay Flowers be that guy?
You're trying to break my heart right now? Are you trying to hurt me right now? No, Jordan Addison and Zay Flowers, obviously they were drafted in the same year as well. So they were both drafted in the first round. I think with Jordan Addison, while he didn't have the greatest quarterbacks throwing to him last year, he did have Justin Jefferson that was out for a while. So he did become the number 1 guy. I think Jordan Addison's a great number 2. I drafted Zay Flowers. It was last year. It wasn't until the latter rounds. They're talking up Rashad Bateman, who I'm on the Bateman train. He's from Minnesota. I love Golden Gophers, even though they never really translate well into the NFL. But I like him. I don't think he's a number 1. Have the Ravens ever had a really good wide receiver? Man, you could argue maybe for Torrey Smith. You could argue for Steve Smith Sr. at the end of his career when he was there. We had Anquan Bolden at the end of his career, OBJ at the end of his career.
There's kind of a picture going on here. You kind of get all these guys at the end of their career, right? After we've already missed their prime, correct?
Yeah, and I think the main argument is when is Lamar Jackson going to be able to develop a number 1 wide receiver? And so far it just hasn't happened. I like Zay Flowers. His nickname is Joystick. When he gets the ball, it's amazing. But they've also got Mark Andrews coming back. You've got Isaiah Likely, probably the best 1-2 punch and tight ends. I think that they're probably going to do a lot of 1-2 punch or 2 tight end sets. You've got Derrick Henry back there, and their offensive line is massive. So they were the number 1 rushing offense last year. They're going to be the number 1 rushing offense this year, which translates into maybe 800 yards for Zay, maybe 4 or 5 touchdowns for Zay. I think that's what you're looking at with Zay Flowers.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. So the next couple of guys, I mean, I'm very questionable with this one. So we got 2 younger guys that are sandwiching a bunch of older guys. Now, me personally, I would put – so you got Jaden Reed at 28, and then we've got George Pickens at 33. Me personally, I would put George Pickens a little higher. I think he is the team's legitimate number 1 wide receiver. And the wide receivers in Green Bay, I have no idea what's going on there. So I feel like a number 1 in George Pickens is a little safer than what Jaden Reed is able to produce, because we really don't know what Jaden Reed is, right? We're not really sure. But then we got a couple old guys here. We got Stephon Diggs, Deebo Samuel, Christian Kirk, and Calvin Ridley. Now, I'm a fan of George Pickens, so I would prefer him over Jordan Reed. Do y'all feel the same about that? And then out of those older fellas right there, which one do you think has the better season?
Well, Jordan Reed, I would take anybody over Jordan Reed right now. He's
Or
kind of retired. It's funny. Ironically, as I did these rankings a bit back, and I've messed with them a little bit, I got more into my redraft rankings. We'll get to my guy later on. Jaden Reed and then we'll hit Watson in a second are not my favorite receiver in Green Bay. So I'm gonna ask Jeff. You asked us who our favorite. I had to bust your chops. Who your favorite old guy receiver is there in that bunch?
Favorite old guy receiver. Man, I really want to say Stephon Diggs. I really do, but they have Nico Collins there as well. And I think Stephon Diggs brings an attitude with him, obviously. So I can't really get behind the Stephon Diggs. Out of your first part here, George Pickens or Jaden Reed, DJ Dove, I agree with you. I'm not on the Jaden Reed bandwagon. I know Chad Ochocinco came out, whatever it was, a week or two ago, and was like, "Oh, know the name? It's Jaden Reed." And I'm like, I know the name. He's not very good. So that's kind of where I'm at. As much as I hate George Pickens, being a Ravens fan, him being on the Steelers, I do like George Pickens. It's just a matter of who his quarterback is going to be. And honestly, I don't think you can go wrong with either one of the guys that they've got there. I will say, be careful with Calvin Ridley. I do like, and I think we might have hinted on this on the last episode, I like Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley is a deep ball guy. And if Will Levis can actually get the ball to Calvin Ridley, I think he could put up some massive numbers this year. So I like him out of the bunch.
Yeah, I would have.
You knew I'd love that. You knew I'd love that one.
Well, you know what? And it wasn't just for you. I mean, on my spreadsheet, he's green for being a sleeper. It's if I get close to Calvin Ridley, I'm going to be, I know a lot of people have him in that wide receiver, maybe 31 to 35 type area. I think I would honestly, I would take him before any Chicago Bears wide receivers. Sorry.
He's my number 20 in redraft. So I'm at plus 15 on ECR and redraft on Calvin Ridley. So.
Yeah.
I like that. Of those guys, I mean, I'm looking at Calvin Ridley. Christian Kirk has the ball back to himself as you're looking there. Debo's the X factor within that. Like, I'm a Debo lover. I've loved Debo since he's came into the league. But we're talking fantasy football. I would joke to JJ Wang last year. If you looked at the 49ers, Debo is their battery. He doesn't have to do it. If Debo plays, the 49ers look better. Christian McCaffrey's the best player on the team by a mile. But if Debo's playing, he's the heart and soul of that team. And when Debo's in there, that team is different. They function different. It's nothing that can be measured here. It's something we measure by watching the game and just seeing what he brings. So fantasy, I would love to see number 2 ranked Debo's from a couple years ago, but I just don't think we will.
Yeah, and Debo, they came out with this crazy stat last year when Debo plays, they have an 80% chance better of winning. And I thought, they showed all the games where, Debo didn't play these handful of games. They lost most of them. Debo played these games. They won most of them. It's a weird anomaly for, what could be a number 1, number 2 wide receiver, depending on how you want to put Brandon Ayuk in there. And yet that'll play out. If Ayuk gets a trade, who knows what's going on with his contract negotiations? That could really boost Debo Samuels up there.
Yeah, I just don't see Debo getting back to that wide receiver 1 fantasy year that he had. I feel like that year was kind of the anomaly, right? He was injured pretty much all before that. Then he had that one great, fantastic year, got paid, and then after that, he's just kind of, I'm not saying he's a great player, but he's not like a great fantasy option, I think, at this point in his career. So yeah, it's definitely questionable.
Who's your old guy, JJ Wang, of that bunch?
I think they're all trash. Not a fan of Calvin, really. I think the offense is dreadful. I think Christian Kirk is possible here. I mean, he was in the beginning of last season. I thought he played really well. Kind of disappeared after in the second half of the season. But hopefully we can get something better out of Trevor Lawrence. I'm kind of hoping. But I mean, I guess as far as who's going to be the best receiver out of that bunch. That's a tough one. I'm going to go Christian Kirk because I'm just not a fan of the other ones. But
and see, this is where I'm gonna adamantly disagree with you, JJ. When I'm looking at Christian Kirk, yeah, he had that core muscle injury, right? He only played 12 games, 57 receptions, 787 yards. I look at who's throwing on the ball. I don't know where people get off with Trevor Lawrence being a top 5 quarterback. I don't know where they get off with him being a top 10 quarterback. I don't think he is. When you look at his numbers, he's a top 15 quarterback at best. And the fact that they gave him the most amount of money, he is the highest paid guy for doing what? Really? I mean, his QBR was a 56.2, which puts him at 18th. His passer rating was an 88.5, which puts him at 23rd. He's not a top 10 quarterback. Quit treating him like he is. He's not that great. Sorry. So therefore, his wide receivers are not going to be that great either.
I can agree, but he does got some nice hair, and I think he looks. I think he looks good out there when he's flinging it across the field, right? But yeah, that's totally agree. I don't think Trevor Lawrence definitely hasn't lived up to the lived up to the hype that he was coming out. But like I said, all those other, I mean, the Houston offense I like, but how many times has a team like come out of nowhere for 1 year, looked great, and then everybody jumps on the bandwagon, and we come back that next year and they're just not the same. I think there is that little bit of worry in Houston. I don't want to believe it, but I do think there might be a little regression there in Houston. I think 49ers are going to be what the 49ers always are. None of those receivers are going to be legitimate wide receiver one in contention, I don't think. But yeah, I mean, any of those guys, I mean, I guess they're all going to be about the same. But I mean, like you said, you're throwing darts. I mean, it's an old guy on your team. It'll kind of work, I guess. We'll go to number 34. We got Christian Watson, Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp. You got Deontay Johnson there in Carolina, Amari Cooper. And the guy that I really want to talk about at number 39, you got Ladd McConkey. Now, granted, 39 isn't very high. I mean, it's outside wide receiver 3. I personally am not on the Ladd McConkey train at all. I think he's going to be, like Steve Smith Sr. likes to say, a jag, just a guy. That's what he called Jerry Jeudy. I was listening to it the other day. It was absolutely hilarious.
It's true.
But yeah, but I mean, I think he's just going to be like a good wide receiver 3 on an offense. I mean, I don't think if you put Ladd McConkey out there as your number 1 and he's getting coverage by the number 1 cornerbacks, I think he's going to get highly embarrassed. You can put him in the slot, but I mean, how much are the Chargers actually going to throw, right?
They should have drafted J.J. McCarthy for those 2 passing.
Yeah, I don't know. How much are they going to throw? Chargers are they're going to be kind of an anomaly. I think Herbert had maybe his best weapons that he's had in a while, and now you got what? You got Quentin Johnson, and you got Ladd McConkey, and
Joshua Palmer.
I almost forgot about Joshua Palmer. I mean, out of those guys that you said, I think they're going to be a running team. Look at who they gathered. They basically poached the Ravens of J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. They're taking every former Raven that they could possibly get their hands on. I think they even got Tony Jefferson. Kind of ridiculous. I don't know if his brother is whispering in his ear like, hey, take these guys, I don't want them anymore. But yeah, I think they're going to be more of a running game. I mean, obviously they just they drafted Joe Alt, the first pick, so whether that's to protect Herbert, give him a little bit more time, but he's an excellent run blocker as well. He's a big dude, so I think they're going to transform that offense into a little bit more running, kind of like what they did in Michigan, and they're going to just they'll have Herbert pass when he needs to pass, and hopefully that works out. It hasn't in the past, but hey, you got a new coach. Out of those groups, I think we're so far down right now with the wide receivers. I like Devontae Adams. A lot of people don't, just because it's Aiden O'Connell throwing him the ball, but it's still Devontae Adams. It's Aiden O'Connell's not a terrible quarterback. I think he's a work in progress. We'll see this year. I don't know. You just lost Josh Jacobs. So it's like, the year before last, he was the number 1 rusher. And for whatever reason, I don't know if they're trying to change their identity or whatever. They got Brock Bowers there now. I think that's an excellent pickup. And, if Aiden O'Connell doesn't work out, I'm a huge Gardner Minshew fan, man.
Oh,
I love that guy. Yes. If you've seen his pictures with the Raiders now, you got to check that out. That is the most bad A pictures that he's had with his photo ops with the Raiders in the black and silver and the Fu Manchu. It's really crazy. But I like Devontae Adams out of all those. I think he comes back. I think he has a great year.
Yeah, I do like the Devontae Adams pick. I feel like you can kind of put him in that Tyreek Hill area where, I mean, you might only get a year out of him, but on a dynasty team, I mean, if you're trying to win, Devontae Adams is one of those guys that I feel like you can get kind of on the cheap that's going to produce some very, very good numbers for you. So
yeah, absolutely.
All right, well, so we'll go up here. Well, so we'll finish out. We'll go all the way to number 50 here. Number 40, we got Terry McLaurin, Keenan Allen. You got 2 rookies, Brian Thomas Jr. and Keon Coleman. The aforementioned Hollywood Brown, Josh Downs, Quentin Johnson, Cortland Sutton for some reason. I'm not sure. Xavier Worthy. Chris Godwin, I do like. And then my favorite player possibly in the history of the world. We had to get him in here. We got Gabe Davis. Love me some Gabe Davis. I think I might be the only one that likes Gabe Davis, but I can't help who I like, right? It's just not. But the guy that I want to bring up here, I think the most interesting out of all this is Keon Coleman, the rookie, right? So Stephon Diggs, the obvious number one wide receiver in Buffalo, did not look good at the end of the season last year. He leaves, goes to Houston. So there is a big opening for wide receiver one there in Buffalo. I know we all like Khalil Shakur. I don't know how you feel about Khalil Shakur, Jeff. I think Dove mentioned, who was the guy you mentioned earlier that's going to be great.
I just what's his name out of Washington and Carolina? Samuel, yeah.
Be great. I don't see anything great from Curtis Samuel, but I do think Keon Coleman might not be the guy like first 4 or 5 games, but he's big, he's fast. Josh Allen can definitely swing it. I mean, there's no question about that. We can question all these other quarterbacks and their ability to sling it, but you can't question Josh Allen. And I think Keon Coleman is a good receiver for that kind of thing to happen. And like, I know they're going to run the ball a lot when they get down into that goal line area inside the 5, but I mean, if you're just throwing fades to this big, strong wide receiver, I think you might only get 1,000 yards, but I mean, I think you might also get like 10 touchdowns. So, I mean, it's crazy. How do y'all feel about Keon Coleman?
I'll take that one too. It's wide receivers for Buffalo. They got Khalil Shakir and Keon Coleman. Who do you like better? I think Coleman's going to be number one. And how do you not like a number one wide receiver on any football team, no matter how bad it is? But we're talking about the Bills, and they got Josh Allen, arguably top 5 quarterback in the league. So, yeah, I love Keon Coleman there. Picked at the 33rd pick, and then behind them, they don't have bad wide receivers. I feel like they kind of took these old, a little bit older guys, but that have names like Marquise Valdez-Scantling and Mark Hollins and Chase Claypool, who, the names, they just don't produce much. And Chase Claypool is a cancer. So, but we won't get into that. I like Keon Coleman. But out of the group that you mentioned, I like Brian Thomas Jr. I think LSU guy, I was thinking that Cincinnati was going to snag him in the first round because it just made sense. You got Burrow from LSU. You got Jamar Chase from LSU. Brian Thomas Jr., I had him in the first round, and Jacksonville snagged him, which I think that was a big one. I think I had him going somewhere 18, 19, wherever Cincinnati was picking, and they got him 20-something. So I like Brian Thomas Jr. I think he's going to be a big factor in Jacksonville.
I love Brian Thomas Jr. He's big. He's fast. I mean, what's wrong with that? I mean, the only problem he has is what y'all talked earlier. He does have Trevor Lawrence throwing to him. Will he still be okay?
He got some nice hair, dude. I mean, the locks going out of his helmet, man. I mean, he just looks great standing back there. So that was the top 50. Is there any other wide receivers as far we haven't mentioned as far as maybe a sleeper goes that y'all are interested in that we should watch out for?
I'll do mine while you're pulling yours up. While you think of yours, mine is the guy that I would move up because I'm on this guy and he might be my guy this year. That's Dontavian Wicks, receiver for the Green Bay Packers. I fell in love with Jordan Love in this offseason a little more than I was before because he proved me wrong. So I got to jump on the bandwagon to a point, and they've got 4 wide receiver 2. Someone's going to get there, and maybe it's the hype. Maybe it's because he's a UVA boy right down the road here. Maybe it's because I know people that know him. But I'm just, the more and more that comes out, the coaches are like, the way he moves. They're not saying he's like Devontae Adams, but they're saying a lot of his prep, the way he approaches his routes, and the way he's running, is reminiscent of Adams. So maybe he's the guy that makes the leap, and I could swap him up. He's the guy that I think if you listen to this show and it's like late July, he's probably going to be higher in my rankings. Yeah.
Did we happen to mention Deontay Johnson?
I did. I mentioned him earlier in briefing. But
yeah. I think Deontay Johnson in Carolina is intriguing, even though I'm not a real big fan of Bryce Young. I think that's an intriguing one to not sleep on. And then a guy that we mentioned way before that I think you can let slide a little bit is Amari Cooper. That quarterback situation, I mean, when was the last time? I know that he played last year, so I'm being a little bit fictitious here, but Deshaun Watson, how much has he played in the last 3 years? He was suspended, he was hurt, he was this, he was that. Amari Cooper, he looked really good. He showed flashes. He actually killed me at the end, and maybe I have a little bit of a beef with him, but he actually killed me in my game right before making it to the fantasy football championships with his, damn 250 yards and 3 touchdowns from one of my favorite guys, Joe Flacco. Man, that he just stake in the heart. But I don't think he's going to put up as good as of numbers. I think Amari Cooper can slide. Deontay Johnson out of the group that we were talking about. Keep your eyes on him.
So what's your thought? So what's your thought on Xavier Legette also with Carolina? Do you think he can provide some kind of anything at all? I'll just say anything at all.
I thought that was a really weird move up, and I get it. They moved up to get Legette, and maybe it's because he's a Gamecock. I don't know. Maybe he's from South Carolina. They were really, after reading some stuff and listening to some stuff, Carolina was really huge on Legette. And they pinpointed him, they targeted him, like, that's our guy. He's at the top of our board. We want him. I don't see it the same way. I thought he was, when I was looking at, different draft scenarios, he was always maybe the beginning of the second round. I think he'll be a good wide receiver. I've got nothing against him. I don't think he's a stud number one. But I think maybe the combo between, him and Deontay Johnson, hopefully that works for Bryce Young. Hopefully that works, for Carolina. But I'm not really sold on him. I think out of anyone, and again, I was high on Adonai Mitchell, and I thought he should have went first round instead of Legette. So that's where I'm at.
So I'm guessing that from the sounds of it, you're a big Adonai Mitchell fan, right? I mean, I like him too. I thought I don't watch a lot of film, but this year I started watching a lot more college film, the All 22 tape, and I thought when I put his film on, he didn't have a lot of yards. I mean, he didn't produce a whole lot in Texas, but when he was on the field, like the plays he made, they just looked fantastic. I mean, he was, like you said, he was just bigger, faster, and stronger than everybody. Now, Xavier Worthy was on the other side, getting quite a few more yards than Mitchell. But I think I do agree that Mitchell should have been a little higher. But there was also like a lot of personal stuff seemed to be going down with Mitchell, like prior to the draft started, that seemed to make him slide a whole lot. But yeah, I mean, I really do. I mean, I'm a big fan of Mitchell as well.
I'm not as big. I liked Mitchell going in. I loved Mitchell in Buffalo was what I was dreaming of. And then he falls basically to Lamar Jackson 2.0. So he's in. That's why I had I'm sinking him like a champ. But I was like, because Pittman, if I think Pittman's going to be that good, Downs is he's undersized, but I think he's good for that role he's going to have. He got some when he played there. I can't talk right now, but he's that good little short dump off guy for Richardson as he's moving, and they got giant tight ends, and Jonathan Taylor is still there, so he's going to be the fourth option on that team, which is, I mean, he's probably tied with Downs. Like Downs is nothing stellar, but I just think there's not a lot of room for too many options with a quarterback who's going to run like I believe Richardson will.
Yeah, and I don't think you have to worry about a tight end in Indianapolis. They don't have that option like Kansas City or San Francisco. Johnny Woods was a rookie last year, and he was probably the worst starting tight end in the NFL. Honestly, he put up virtually nothing, 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, 25 catches. I mean, what is that? It's a catch and a half per game. He doesn't get the ball thrown to him. But what you've got was obviously last year with rookie Josh Downs, Adonai Mitchell, Michael Pittman Jr. I think those 3 are enough. I don't think that they have to necessarily check down, which might not be Richardson's game plan either. He likes to scramble. That's how he got hurt. Maybe he stays in the pocket a little bit more. Maybe he's looking at his top 3 wide receivers. And by the way, they do have Jonathan Taylor in the background or in the backfield. So, I think all 3 of them should be. I think they'll place very well. As far as, here's your number 1 wide receiver. I think Michael Pittman, he'll finish in the top 15. And then whoever the number 2 guy is going to be, I think they finish around, in the 30s or 40s, both of them. as far as receptions and yards. I just think that they're going to, all three of them are going to be a really big part of that offense.
I guess my last notes here, then we'll close it out because we've had so much fun talking here. Is I thought two things that would make you both happy is Xavier Worthy. I saw he might be too high for my liking even, but I'm minus 19 to ECR, so I have him at 48, which is still minus 19 to ECR, which is insane. And Gabe Davis plus 14. JJ Wayne got him at a plus 14. We just can't get over those goose eggs. We'll keep suffering for the rest of our lives. He was one of our fantasy Couriers guys the other year. They're just guys you love for no other reason than anything else.
Gabe Davis is. I feel like we've got what's the guy from Seattle?
DK or Jackson?
No,
Tyler
Lockett.
Okay, I feel like Gabe Davis and Tyler Lockett are this kind of like the same receiver. They're either going to give you 25 points or they're going to give you 0 points. There's really no in between, and that's pretty much what Gabe Davis was last year. I mean, he had several games and scoring 20 points in a game, but he just killed you so much. You just couldn't. It was just too hard to start him. But I still love the guy. Can't help it.
Well, there we have. If you want to see more of my rankings, www.fantasycouriers.com. There, you can also take some time to check out downfieldread.com. If you forget how that is, it's downfieldread.com. If you really can't remember that, go to fantasycouriers.com. Go to Fantasy Turf Wars. Click on downfieldread.com. Pretty soon, Jeff, and you might even hear by then, he's going to send me a little blurb, little information section that will pop up on there. He's going to be our first team on there. Maybe no one else gets it, and he gets the page all to himself. But Jeff, Jeff, you give us a little wisdom, then JJ Wang, you give us some wisdom, and let's roll out of here.
A little bit of wisdom on wide receivers, or
anything you want. Any wisdom you got for us?
It's been a great time. I love talking about these different aspects, and the wide receivers is just one part of it. Get in it. If you're not into fantasy football, I've turned so many people on to fantasy football. If you're not in a league yet, get into a league. It's a ton of fun. The keeper league that we have, or the dynasty league that we have. Before I met my wife, she wanted nothing to do with football. Now she finished pretty well last year, and we've got her nickname, or her team name, Trophy Wife, which can't argue with that. But then I've got cousin-in-laws and brother-in-laws, and it's such a lot of fun to get together. And this is our board that we're going to be filling out this year coming up, season 2. If you can see that up at the top for this Downfield Read Dynasty League. It's a lot of fun. And whether you want to take it seriously or not, obviously we take it a little bit more seriously. We're getting in depth. We've got the analytics to it. Whether you're playing for money, we play for who's not going to wear the pink shirt with the rainbow and the unicorn that says I suck at fantasy football.
Nice.
So there is that kind of a penalty. But go out and get yourself in a league if you're not already. If you are in a league, you think we're full of crap, go ahead and tell us, because that's always fun too. But otherwise, this has been a great time. Love it. Thank you very much.
And if your excuse is, I don't know anything about football, or I don't have the time, blah, 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 blah. We've all heard those excuses. Well, first off, you don't need to know anything about football. We had to do like a little family league. My mom ended up winning, and she really doesn't know. I'm not saying she doesn't know anything. She watches football, but she doesn't know anything about these guys, right? So it doesn't matter how much you know. And if you say you don't have enough time, legitimately, it only takes 5 to 10 minutes a week to actually look at your lineup and set it. So there's really no excuse other than the fact that, hey, I don't like football, to not play fantasy. If you don't like football, obviously, fantasy football is not going to be fun for you. That's pretty clear. But if your excuses are, I don't know enough, or I don't have the time, I think they're such illegitimate excuses. Just tell me you don't want to play. I'd rather you just tell me that. So as always, trust yourself and trust the process.